Look at what happens. Look at the news. The people who get indicted in due time are just regular people who happen to be targeted. The IRS looks at you not as a person, but as a place to put into a press release. You have no choice but to admit to something you actually didn't do because you didn't have the emotional fortitude to handle a trial that's going to last 3 years and the hundreds of thousands of dollars it costs to put on a defense.
Basically, despite being ignorant of these laws, like legally speaking, I'm in serious trouble.
Brian, you are the culmination of the absurdity of the U.S. tax code.
Having moved abroad at the age of 23, I overlooked many legal obligations as a U.S. citizen, obligations that follow you regardless of where you reside. Unknown to most, U.S. persons are taxed on citizenship, not territory. Having missed the memo, I may have been in serious violation, facing life-altering consequences. So imagine that an uninformed UK schoolteacher was fined $40,000 for failing to report her $240,000 teacher pension. She was unaware of these regulations. The consequence for non-compliance, even if you're not voluntary, can be life-altering. Americans must report all of their financial accounts to the Department of Treasury in FBAR reports, or risk facing fines of $10,000 per account per year. This also applies to retirement pensions, interest-gaining life insurance policies, and any accounts they may have signature authority over or financial interest in. Now let's imagine that you were born in the United States, but to foreign parents who promptly took you back to their home country. You never lived in America. You are what's known as an accidental American. And now imagine that at some point in your life you open a limited liability company, maybe a small family business, just to earn as anyone naturally would like to. In the eyes of the United States government, you hold a foreign-controlled corporation. With it comes mind-boggling reporting obligations. Despite potentially not even speaking English or knowing American accounting standards, your company is considered American-controlled by the US government. The LLC must submit a yearly 5471. This procedure is massively expensive, complex, and may come with brutal fines. Filing mistakes can be $10,000 per occurrence, even if no tax is due. And if the IRS demands a Form 5471 and you haven't provided it, the penalties can get as extreme as $50,000 per year. Again, even if no tax was due. Despite the territory, the IRS can wipe out someone's life savings with the snap of a finger. But what's more daunting is how these laws are now enforced. Back in 2010, the US government passed a law named FATCA, forcing both account holders and non-US financial institutions to report the assets of US persons via a broad, complex set of rules designed to increase tax compliance. In order to get the same information on a US domestic bank account, law enforcement would have to either issue a warrant or have a summons. Yet FATCA negates these protections of the Fourth Amendment. Although US citizens are bound to US law when abroad, they're not necessarily protected by constitutional rights. Now you might wonder why banks in practically every part of the world, including Russia and China, would embrace such crazy, expensive bureaucratic compliance. The answer is brilliant in a sick genius type of way. American persons who don't comply face fines of $10,000 per account per year for non-willful failure to file. The banks also face harsh sanction, 30% of their US transfers for failure to report American clients. Once implemented, these sanctions are accomplished by forcing US-based business partners to hand over 30% of any outgoing transfers to foreign financial institutions in questions. In the event that a US business partner doesn't pay, they become liable for the entire situation, a situation they had nothing to do with in the first place. I might also add that the expense of implementation of these laws far exceed new revenue generated by it. FATCA makes average Americans into criminals. Foreign banks are punished for having American clientele. And potentially worst of all is that domestic companies become liable for tax situations abroad that they have nothing to do with. Generally speaking, FATCA hurts everyone. I can't even begin to describe how violating it feels to wake up one day and realize that you're bound to a lunacy that could destroy you and your family. So I caught a plane to Connecticut to meet a lawyer who specializes in these cases, hoping to potentially make my situation right.
Hey, buddy. What's happened a lot is that a lot of banks simply won't take on U.S. clients to say, look, we just don't want to deal with you.
Even if I'm a Polish citizen?
Even if you're a Polish citizen, they'll say, well, you're still a U.S. person, so we don't want to have you. Yet in the FATCA law, it says foreign banks cannot discriminate against U.S. persons. The banks now are required to do their due diligence to say, are you a U.S. person? Do they see a U.S. address, a U.S. place of birth, U.S. phone numbers, U.S. email accounts associated with something? If so, they'll send you a FATCA letter saying, hey, you should really check with your advisor to see what we're going to report you to the IRS if you don't say you're in compliance. And so what they did with the Revenue Act of 1862 and 1863 is they imposed a citizenship-based taxation. So, hey, look, you want to go anywhere around the world, we're still going to tax you. Nobody cares about expats. You know, the feeling is, okay, you might be a U.S. citizen, but you left us, so, you're on your own. I talked to many people who say that they used to fill positions, some very high-end positions around the world, Hong Kong, UK, Australia, that were typically staffed by U.S. persons, but because of U.S. tax code, because FATCA have made U.S. persons so toxic, those jobs go to somebody else. You're denying people opportunity. And I don't think that's right. The thing that has really hit home with me is quite a few Holocaust survivors as clients. And it makes sense that they would have an account in Europe. Yeah. A lot of times it was maybe a family member of theirs inherited, or it was for reparations for the Holocaust. And, for them, that they look at that money overseas as not theirs. It's theirs, but it's not theirs, because that is a legacy. That's not for them. That's a memento of their suffering and everything they went through. And to see somebody like that who's been through what they've been through by a tyrannical government sort of be run through the mill for not reporting an account that, by the way, was in full tax compliance in the country it was located in, when they're treated like a criminal, you really, that's the one that seems to be the point where we as citizens should really pause to say, wait a second, I don't think we're the good guys here.
These laws are beyond asinine, but I will comply as a facility of the world we live in. However, as a citizen who now understands his obligation to the United States of America, I also plan to embrace my ability to influence. The American Congress will absolutely be hearing from me. I'd like to extend an extra heartfelt thanks to Anthony Perrin from the IRS Medic channel. Their channel taught me a lot about international tax law. Check out the interview that he did with me where I disclose a lot of personal details about my own case, and make sure that you subscribe to his channel. He is the flagship attorney for international tax law and probably saved me a lot of money and my freedom. Subscribe to his channel, and I will see you again on Kult America next time.